We live at 143 Frankie Circle. Why? Uh-oh.
We will be right back.
I told you not to go in that chat room.
So before, when Disney Plus was just a potential streaming service that Disney wanted to do, most people had some good ideas of what they could do with the service. Obviously, most saw it as an opportunity for Disney to consolidate all their properties into one big streaming service, but I saw it for better means. As I saw it as a way for Disney to bring back attention to a lot of their older shows. Because there are plenty of shows they have done or even own the rights to that needed a second chance. A lot of good to great shows that hadn't seen the light of day since their last airing back in like 2007 or whatever. With streaming being such a great avenue for TV shows, I think Disney should have taken this opportunity to take the shows that haven't even gotten a DVD release a second life for new people to witness with their own service. And you know, Disney Plus actually did a good job with that by having it be the first avenue for shows like Recess, Teacher's Pet, Dinosaurs, and The Muppet Show being introduced to new audiences through streaming. But there was one major show I was really hoping to get re-released on Disney Plus. A show that was a huge part of my childhood in the same vein of most other Disney, Cartoon Network, and Nickelodeon shows. And one that I felt was truly underrated and overlooked. And that show in question is the one and only...
He's Roly-Poly-Oly.
Yeah, Roly-Poly-Oly. Such a fun little show for little kids. It's cute, it's fun, it's neat. But in all seriousness, the show I'm actually talking about is Pepper Ann today. This was a show that really encompasses a lot of what I love to see in an animated series. Since 2021, Disney Plus finally got this show on their platform. And I'm so glad because this, aside from The Muppet Show, has been my most requested show to appear on the platform. It's such an overlooked show with not a huge following, but one that I think deserves more credit than it has gotten. And honestly, it's a lot better than you remember it.
Cool, maracas. If you can, Pepper Ann.
So, what's the deal with Pepper Ann? What's the concept? Who created it? And how did it came to be? Is she really too cool for 7th grade? Well, let's start explaining who Pepper Ann is by going back to the 90s to see what Disney was doing. Of course, in terms of TV shows at the time, Nickelodeon had really done something for animation on TV with shows that were a little bit more unique in art styles and had more of this 90s edge that we all know and love. With it being so popular, of course Disney tried to capitalize on that trend by making their own shows in the vein of popular Nick shows. Namely utilized in the long gone but not forgotten block One Saturday Morning. Looking at the popular Nick shows that helped started the channel, it's clear to see what shows Disney took some inspiration from. They made their own version of Ren and Stimpy with Snookums and Meat, which didn't last very long at all. Recess was essentially their version of the Rugrats with similar themes and style to it, even getting some of the creators of that show on there too. And finally, Nickelodeon also gave us Doug as one of their first shows. So with Disney essentially creating their own Rugrats and Ren and Stimpy, and Doug being the other big show of early day Nickelodeon, there was only one logical step for Disney to do: buying out the rights to Doug and rebooting it as their own show. And they also made Pepper Ann, which I say serves as kind of Disney's own version of Doug in a lot of ways. A slice of life TV series focusing on a middle schooler and the issues they face. Though, if you honestly ask me, Pepper Ann is easily the better show between the two. For me, this show got a lot more personal and a lot more personality to it. Of course, there's a little more to the show from its background, as this is the first major Disney animated show where the showrunner was a woman. The show was created by Sue Rose, who also created Angela Anaconda and the Nick Teen show Unfabulous. Now, I admittedly have not seen either of these shows, but considering some of the reception of Angela Anaconda and Unfabulous being a show that doesn't seem to be made for me at all, it's safe to say that Pepper Ann was more up my alley. right down to its art direction, which, if it looks a little familiar to you, the show art direction was done by none other than Mr. Warburton of Codename Kids Next Door. You can definitely tell with how the characters have similar looking designs from their big hands and often small beady eyes. The show came before K&D though, and you can tell it's an early version of that style, which was more refined in Kids Next Door, with it being more action oriented compared to Pepper Ann's slice of life mentality. His artwork is very appealing in my opinion, being very simple yet more unique designs for characters with a lot of colors popping out. The show lasted from 1997 to 2000, and you can tell with it being one of the most 90s as hell things Disney's has ever done. I mostly watched this when it was on Toon Disney, as it aired a lot on that channel until like 2007, and since then the show hasn't had a proper re-release on TV, DVD, or even streaming for that matter. That always disappointed me, because the most I could ever find of this show would be on YouTube, and I felt this show definitely should have been watched by more. It's hard to find fans of Pepper Ann because of it, but thanks to Disney Plus, this is where I'm hoping Pepper Ann will get more attention from people that I'm sure would absolutely love it. And that's also why I'm making this video, to give this show the attention it deserves. So let's actually start talking about the show itself. So, like I said earlier, Pepper Ann is very much Disney's version of Doug. A slice of life animated series about a young kid and all the crazy shenanigans they would get into. Being animated, Pepper Ann does take advantage of it by having the character have an overactive imagination. Right from the intro, you can tell with it starting out as her dreaming about being an ultra badass, but that of course distracts her as she ends up being late for school, which is a running gag throughout the entire series. And the intro also showcased some of her other friends and family briefly. The one aspect I never quite got during the theme was this brief moment of people talking.
Who? Is that girl from gym class?
No, that's me.
Oh. Who is she and why does she have her own song?
Did someone take my lunch?
Who's talking during all of this? Frankly, I don't know, because they never specify, and it's so random. But the intro is pretty iconic for having their own couch gag a la Simpsons style, with Pepper Ann picking up whatever neat thing she finds under her desk.
Look, a French poodle!
Le Poivre Anne est un spectacle plus amusant.
As for the show itself, Pepper Ann deals with her basically going through life in her own way, in the town of Hazelnut. Not only does she have an overactive imagination, but she also has a lot of ambition, wanting to become a scientist, and wanting the best to happen for her friends and the world she lives in. Though she tends to deal with typical issues that most middle schoolers deal with, like being afraid of public perception of herself, with her often fearing things out of embarrassment. Her daydreaming getting the best of her, as while she's smart, she also doesn't always get the best grades. And she often gets herself into a lot of crazy harebrained schemes to get out of trouble or to impress another person. Typical for a show of this caliber. But what makes me like Pepper Ann so much is that while she does get into trouble a lot, and she doesn't always make the best decisions, it's clear that she legitimately cares and does want to learn from her mistakes to better herself. She even has a conscience in this series in the form of her reflection, who basically becomes a character onto herself, giving Pepper Ann a ton of advice on what might be the best decision going to her head.
Is this a good idea? We're not taking it. We're just holding it for a little while, and we're doing this to stop the needless slaughter of skunks and or gophers.
She's honestly a very compelling character, and a character that I completely relate to big time, being someone with a lot of ambition, but also wants to enjoy themselves as well. Though she's of course not the only one who makes this show, as Pepper Ann has a plethora of characters to get attached to. So let's go on to Pepper Ann's best friends, starting with Nikki Little. Nikki serves as Pepper Ann's smart best friend. She's the double D, the AJ, the brain, the character who tends to overexcel at most schoolwork, and would use a ton of big words that my little 7-year-old mind could not quite comprehend either.
Some studies have suggested that even imaginary violence can have a desensitizing effect.
De-what-atizing?
Desensitizing, meaning prolonged exposure can make someone become hardened and callous to actual violence. The line between fantasy and reality becomes blurred.
While she is intelligent, she also has her own issues to deal with, as she has an overachieving sister that she struggles to live up to sometimes, has a strange fear of swans, and can often have a bit of a temper, usually getting pissed at Pepper Ann's shenanigans she ends up getting roped into.
You are the one who's ripped the friend out of friendship, and now your ship's going down alone, baby.
As far as smart characters go, Nikki is quite enjoyable, although admittedly, I might be more of a fan of PA's other best friend, Milo. Milo is the artistic friend of her, who serves as the main guy character on the show. He's also Hawaiian and super laid back, just being someone who wants to make art to express himself.
This is not just another art class project. It is a piece of my soul. I give you Clean Up Lupkin Park.
He's probably the other character on this show that I relate to the most aside from Pepper Ann.
Like most artists, he's very passionate
and suffers from artist block or burnt out, something that I'm sure we all can relate to. One neat thing about Milo is that despite being the main guy friend, he really isn't a love interest for Pepper Ann or Nikki. There are some episodes that do dive into Milo potentially being a love interest, but they're never permanent, and end up sticking with Milo just being the other best friend character of the main trio. Unlike a lot of other movies and shows where if there's a trio with one of them being the opposite gender, they usually end up with one of the other two. So I'm glad they did not go that route. The main trio actually have their own sort of love interests throughout the show, but we'll get to them a little bit later. First we gotta get to Pepper Ann's family, as Peppy also has her mom, or Lydia Pearson, who, rewatching it again, she's another character that I ended up really adoring during most of this recent watch through.
Pepper Ann, do you want breasts?
What?
I'm baking chicken. Do you want breasts or thighs?
She serves as her role as being the typical mom that we see in these kind of shows, overtly loving to the point of embarrassment to Pepper Ann, though unlike other cartoons, it showcases the struggle she has with raising her kids, but in a way that's more realistic, and at the time, she becomes one of the best voices of reasons throughout the entire show. She gives Pepper Ann a lot of great advice, and shows genuine care for her, because more than most animated parents, she understands the struggle of being an awkward teenager at points. She's also a single working mom, but the show doesn't portray it as being a bad thing at all, even if it shows the struggle she may have being a single working mom. As for her dad, well, Chuck Pearson doesn't really appear in too many episodes, but whenever he does, he also manages to be a very enjoyable supporting father figure. And they even touch on the issues of Pepper Ann feeling the awkwardness of being in a divorced family, but in a way that's also very relatable to any kid who might be in that situation. He's also a pilot, which the only other character in an animated show I can think of with divorced parents is Buster from Arthur, who, get this, his father is also a pilot. So I guess the lesson there is that kids, don't date a pilot. It won't work out that well. There's also Pepper Ann's little sister named Margaret Rose Pearson, otherwise known as Moose. And if you haven't already tell, she is the epitome of a tomboy character. Almost to the point where some can easily mistake her for a boy, as she doesn't dress that feminine unless there's a plot element that requires her to. She skateboards, and even her voice sounds a little bit more raspy and deeper than the average little sister voice.
What am I going to be when I grow up?
Yourself, only older.
She's voiced by Pamela Aden. Even though she's also known for voicing a lot of young female characters as well, this voice she gives for Moose is a lot more unique for a little sister character. Though all in all, I really like Moose as a character because she's just honestly a really chilled and laid back character. She's not really like other younger sibling characters who are often hyperactive and annoying, but instead she's just a really cool character that just goes with the flow most of the time. If anything, she seems more annoyed with Pepper Ann and her antics.
Peppy, you're scaring me again.
Outside of the direct family, you also have Aunt Janie, Uncle Jojo, and Cousin Ned. Ned's the one who peers the least out of all of them, as he's just really there to be the lazy cousin who's obsessed with cheese. while Aunt Janie is one of the more prominent characters as not only Lydia's sister, but also the major activist of the group, who often believes in a lot of major environmental issues and fights for her rights. She might come across as annoying for some, but I don't think they make her too overbearing with the activist stuff, and sometimes she tends to be the voice of reason.
Look at it this way. Stealing a dog biscuit is wrong.
Not stealing a dog biscuit is right.
But suppose the little doggy was starving to death and didn't have any money. Then stealing the biscuit would be a little wrong, but also a little right. And that's the way things often are. Gray, like me.
Plus, unlike most modern-day activists, she's married to a police officer.
You mean he's gonna be a cop? The man, the fuzz, the heat.
Though, Uncle Jojo is also a pretty humorous and fun character as the goofy sort of uncle that serves as another form of comic relief.
He puts up a sign that says, it says, "Do not disturb." Get it? Donut. It says, "Do not disturb."
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
I think both characters definitely have their funny moments in regards to how they play up the whole angle with their roles on the show. Outside of the main cast, in the vein of shows like Doug, The Simpsons, Arthur, or hell, practically any of these cartoons from the 90s and 2000s, there are a lot of archetypes you see on the show that make their way into the town of Hazelnut. You got Principal Hickey being the main principal character that we see in these kind of shows in the past, who often has to deal with Pepper Ann's antics, leading to him essentially being the main antagonist of this show, often being aggravated with Pearson herself.
Only 1,274 days until she graduates. I think I'm going to be sick.
We also have a few teachers that make recurring roles, namely Mr. Carter, the science teacher who is strict but kind of awkward as well. Miss Stark, the drama and math teacher who's very loud and outspoken in a very theatrical sort of way. Miss Bladar, the art teacher who just has this I don't give a shit attitude throughout the whole show.
And Mr. Finky, the trying to be hip to the kids yet arguably too old teacher that Pepper Ann deals with.
What's up, party people? Mr. Finky's in the house. Go Finky, go Finky, go.
There's also a few other students that appear as recurring characters that mostly fit the mold of what we see in these kind of shows. There's the ultra popular rich girl in the form of Trinket, who comes across as the stuck-up sort of rich character, an archetype we see pretty often in these shows.
Managed to move your hand out of my face much?
And there's also Trinket's sidekick, Sixie, who is the very clueless, dumb blonde character. Again, another character that we see in these kind of shows.
I'm not really a dumb blonde. I just perpetuate the image to be less intimidating to others.
There's Tessa and Vanessa, twin sisters who always finish each other's sentences.
We're not really celebrities, even though we should be.
And this show even has another archetype we see with the foreign exchange student, known as Dieter. Though he's not a different race like some of these other foreign exchange students, which might be for the better considering some of those characters might come across as racial stereotypes nowadays. Instead, he's a German boy who tends to be very sweet but also very peppy and upbeat.
Introducing the first annual practical joker. Round 1. 3, 2, 1.
Dieter, please take your bad self to detention.
You even get other archetypes that we see in other types of shows like this. The typical tough bully character.
There's the newscaster, who often makes regular appearances.
And even a major rival character in the form of Alice Kane, who doesn't appear much, but serves as a decent stuck-up foil to Pepper Ann, who's amusing to see their conflict with one another whenever one of those episodes appears. There's even a few celebrity appearances. Not a lot, but the show had a few guest stars, including Evel Knievel, the late Alec Trebek, and appearing as himself in an animated series for a change, legend himself, Mark Hamill.
Who? I'm Mark Hamill. You're talking about Dorothy Hamill. No relation.
What? Oh, just get blasted! He played Luke Skywalker, you laser brain!
What, huh? What's going on here? Mr. Hamill? Oh no! Mr. Hamill, I'm sorry! I kneel at the altar of you!
Before I get to some of the major episodes of this show, I did want to briefly talk about 3 more characters who are a big part of the series. As I mentioned earlier, the main 3 do have their own love interests that appear in numerous episodes. First, you got Nikki's boyfriend, Stuart Waldinger, a very nerdy, awkward middle schooler who's obsessed with toy car racing. And you have Milo's girlfriend, Gwen Mesro, a very soft-spoken and cute character that certainly has an appeal of an old middle school crush. But one downside with the show is that whenever we see these characters, they're often in an on-again, off-again relationship. So we get some episodes where they focus on each couple dealing with constant breaking up and getting back together. More so with Gwen Mesro and Milo, which can get kind of annoying. I know it's middle school love, so it doesn't quite matter, but they always tend to either love or hate each other so much to the point where you just want them to make up their damn minds on terms of who they're dating. Although, I will say, if Nikki and Stuart got married and Nikki's last name is Little, you know what that would make Stuart if they got married? Stuart Little. So, who does Pepper Ann have in terms of love interest? Well, she gets the man himself. The coolest of the cool. The badass who doesn't try hard to be badass in the form of...
Hey, Pearson. Cool cream.
Craig Bean. Craig is a character that comes across as the coolest guy in school. And because Pepper Ann deals with a lot of self-confidence issues, she often tries to impress Craig so he doesn't quite see her as an embarrassment. Though truth be told, watching this series again, Craig also ended up being one of my favorite characters of the whole series. Namely because when it comes to love interests, or even cool characters, it tends to be very easy to have them eventually turn out to be either a jerk or an idiot. Craig isn't either of those, since we already got Trinket and Sissy fulfilling those roles. And not only that, but Craig is just a chilled, laid-back dude. He genuinely cares about Pepper Ann. He shows legit interests in her despite some of her insecurities. He even stands up for her at a few points when she's needlessly being harassed, and even gives some honestly poignant advice to her that also end up sticking with me, actually.
My grandfather.
Yeah?
I come here and jam for him sometimes. He's the one that taught me to play.
Wow. I didn't know that.
When he died, I quit guitar. I thought, you know, he's dead and gone. And someday we're all just gonna be dead and gone. You know, what's the point?
I've been feeling that way a lot lately. So what happened?
One day, I got the courage to play a note. Just one. And when I heard it, it was like he was still alive.
Wow.
Yeah, I realized that all the things he taught me, all the time we spent together, it wasn't really gone. It's all right here, inside me.
Thanks, Craig. I gotta run.
Catch you later, Pearson.
When rewatching this series again, I realized that there is a lot to this show than what's on surface level. Pepper Ann has a ton of episodes that you would expect from a slice of life sort of series like this. Plenty of episodes that deal with typical childhood fears when being a middle schooler. The first episode being a prime example, with it being about Pepper Ann struggling with the fact that she has a zit, right as picture day is upon them. There's a lot more episodes that usually deal with everyday sort of things and how Pepper Ann deals with them in her own hyper-imaginative nature, such as dealing with a family trip, being jealous of a popular new kid, being scared of a horror movie you're not supposed to watch, and so much more. For the most part, the series stays relatively grounded, with most of the more fantastical elements being more dream sequences and stuff that Pepper Ann kind of imagines in her own life. However, there are a couple of episodes that do kind of go in a more fantastical direction, such as a Groundhog's Day parody where Pepper Ann wakes up to every day being Friday 420. Nice. A music theme episode where everyone starts singing to Pepper Ann's dismay, and a Freaky Friday Friday parody where Pepper Ann and her mom end up switching bodies. Most of these episodes play out how you would expect, though I do want to give some props to the body swap episode, as rather than having the characters' voices come out of a different body like most animated body swap episodes, they instead still have both Peppy and Lydia's voices still coming out of their own body. Something I think makes this episode stand out, as not only does it make this episode a little bit more believable, since it's hard to buy in other shows where the characters aren't a little weirded out by how their voices have suddenly changed drastically, but both of the actors give a performance like they're playing the other character, which I find a little bit more impressive that they went that extra mile to make it more unique.
I need a cup of fat-free international coffee.
My life is trash.
But enough about typical episodes of the series. I really want to get into the episodes that really stood out for Pepper Ann, because there's a lot of episodes out there that really do work and go into a lot of different territories that you wouldn't expect from a show like this. Let's start with one of the earliest and most infamous episodes, In Support Of. And this definitely is an awkward topic, as Pepper Ann is told that for her next assignment for gym class, she needs to have support. Peppy mistakes their meaning of support by thinking she needs something along the lines of a bra.
That already, Arbor?
Yeah, it goes into the awkwardness of something like that for young girls in a way that's fairly relatable. Except for the part where she flashes the whole school.
It's right here!
Oh, sweet Georgia Brown.
Not just that, but there are a ton of episodes that talk about themes of gender in general, but in a way that becomes very inclusive. This includes one where Milo feels very insecure about his masculinity since he's seen as the guy who always hangs out with girls.
Yeah, and how cool was that moment in Cecilia's journey when she was forced to choose between the pony she loves and her dreams of the circus?
Chick flick.
But the episode ends up concluding to Milo realizing that who he hangs out with shouldn't be a factor of him being masculine, because he's still the chill, unique Milo that anyone, regardless of gender, can really vibe with. Another episode that discusses gender roles is one known as Girl Power, where Peppy's little sister, Moose, gets really excited for this new TV show based off of her favorite superhero, Thundra Woman. And it's the most watered-down, lamest reboot of a superhero, turning this rather badass character into the sissy teenage girl obsessed with shopping and is even dating the main villain of the series.
Ice Thoron. Like, why haven't you called me?
Yo, 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 baby, what's up, what's up? I've been, busy. Yo, wanna get a blubber burger? Word.
Wow, talk about tone deaf. Which leads Moose to give these tone deaf television execs a piece of her mind, and why Thundra Woman's gender isn't a determining factor to what makes her a well-defined character.
She's my hero because she's courageous and selfless. That's all anyone needs to be a hero. It doesn't matter if they're a man or a woman.
Downside is that the show does end up getting canceled in favor of a genderless character. Yes, the execs were like, okay, we can't make a female character work, let's just have a robot. Though it still ends on a good note, with Moose realizing that she still did something worthwhile and meaningful towards giving a character people love justice. Speaking of Moose, one really progressive episode that heavily discusses gender identity is one called Miss Moose. In this episode, Pepper Ann starts noticing a lot of people have been mistaking Moose for a boy due to her androgynous appearance. This causes Pepper Ann to be very nervous that Moose would be seen as an outcast for not fitting into her gender roles. But fortunately, while she does get into some awkward situation, she eventually learns something that a lot of the right-wing nutcases of PragerU have not learned. Moose's gender shouldn't really dedicate the kind of person she wants to be. It's totally fine to embrace your identity and what makes you, you.
Little girls don't do that stuff anymore. I mean, some do, but a lot don't. We skate and play sports and work with lumber. Some women can even be maitre d's in fancy restaurants nowadays.
Moose would definitely be a character people would consider canonically trans, despite the series not particularly saying she is.
But whether you want to do that or not, I think this episode really has a positive message about not letting gender norms define you that I think most could still find to be very relatable. It doesn't just go into topics about gender though, as we see episodes that tackle other interesting topics, including cultural appropriation. In the episode Dances with Ignorance, Pepper Ann starts learning about her family history for a school assignment, and she finds out that her dad's side has some Native American background, making Pepper Ann technically part Indian, which leads to...
Check it out! I'm an Indian!
Oh no! So yeah, while Pepper Ann is excited for this fact, she takes it as an excuse to act like a stereotypical Native American Indian, without realizing that her behavior is on the basis of stereotypes that aren't true to the actual people being represented. It gets all worse when Pepper Ann's mom invites a Navajo family over to learn more about their culture, where Pepper Ann, of course, takes the wrong idea.
You must be Pepper Ann.
How? Now don't tell me, let me guess. You must be something like Taming Bear, or He Who Shoots Arrow with Big Bow.
Jesus! What the Pepper Ann? What the The family, understandably so, gets offended and leave, which leads Pepper Ann to realize that she screwed up. What makes this episode work, though, is that even though you have to sit through a lot of cringe with Pepper Ann acting like an Indian, it never really takes her side. And she does end up learning that even with the best intentions, constantly acting like a stereotype of a culture around people isn't respectful. We know Pepper Ann isn't really trying to be insensitive. She just needs to realize that she actually has to talk to the people about their culture and learn from them rather than just basing it off of what she's seen on television, which she eventually does, as the episode ends with her apologizing to the family and actually learning a lot of fascinating history on her culture, leading to a pretty good message overall, despite the cringe you might have to sit through.
Stop it.
Another big standout episode for me is the episode Spice of Life, where Pepper Ann ends up dealing with this older woman that she has always known as being a whining, complaining, mean person that everyone tends to hate, leading her to say the phrase,
"But would it kill you to be nice for once?"
Yeah, that shouldn't lead to any conflict, as the next day she finds out that the old lady f***ing died. To make things more awkward, she finds out that the lady was actually the mother of her assistant principal, Vera, who wants Pepper Ann to speak at her funeral due to knowing all the nice things her grandma said about Pepper Ann in private. But Pepper Ann, of course, finds it very hard when everyone talks about how much they hate the old woman, only for them to quickly change their attitude as soon as they find out she's dead.
The worst neighbor I have ever had the misfortune to live next door to.
Well, she died yesterday and...
She died? Oh, that poor, dear old woman.
It deals with a tough situation that we don't really see kids media tackle that often, of how to handle death of someone even if they are hated by practically everyone you know. The episode doesn't quite have all the answers, as something like this, it's kind of hard to get to a concrete conclusion, but it ends on a note that I felt is very appropriate and nuanced that I don't see a lot of kids shows tackling that often. It definitely makes me think of the episode of Daria where the most hated student in the school gets killed off and no one knows how to feel, and it's a pretty bold move to discuss death in this manner. Which, while on the topic, many could easily make the comparison that Pepper Ann is just Daria for kids, which I could see why. They're both slice of life animated series with a female protagonist and feel very 90s. And man, I didn't even talk about how 90s as hell this series was, for better or for worse.
Well, don't you fall into the give-up trap. I've had friends that sing and buds that clap. I got some that drum and some that snap. But what you can do, Stu, is you can rap.
You can rap! The biggest difference between the two shows is that I feel Pepper Ann doesn't quite have the cynical edge that someone like Daria has. Daria is very snarky and critical of things, where Peppy has a more optimistic outlook and is willing to learn despite her shortcomings. She's very passionate and ambitious, but is able to admit when she's at fault and becomes better for it, making her, in my opinion, a little more
interesting as someone like Daria. Not to knock on that show either, since it's also quite good, but I always appreciated Pepper Ann's more optimistic outlook, and it's done in a way that's not phony, despite being a cartoon either. I do want to talk about one more episode before I conclude with this series, and that is the series finale. It's significant because it's a future episode, where Pepper Ann is 27, which ironically enough, the same age I'm currently am as I'm making this video. We do see that a lot has changed since Pepper Ann has continued her career to become a video game designer, while losing contact with most of the people from her childhood. That is, till she gets called in for a reunion where she gets to see most of her childhood friends and how much they change over the years, which is really fun to see. This even includes Lydia being remarried to Alex Trebek and Mark Hamill as the President of the United States, which ends up being the biggest disappointment because that never became an actual reality to compare to the celebrity presidents we did get. I don't want to say too much since this show is something I do want more people to check out, but the reunion leads to Pepper Ann realizing an old mistake she made in the 7th grade and her wanting to present that mistake from going public, leading her to do one last major hijinks with Nikki and Milo. It's a very nice conclusion in terms of how these characters' stories end, and the final scene of the whole series has this really sentimental feeling to it that makes me glad this show had a proper finale. It's part of the reason I prefer shows when they actually do have a set ending, because everything just feels right with how it ends, with no real follow-ups to potentially ruin anything that was set up. There's no real hype for a revival of Pepper Ann, but at the same time, it doesn't need to have one. What it does need is a bit more attention, as let's discuss the true impact this show had on me. So what really bummed me out about this series is the simple fact that it never got a whole lot of airtime in future release, leading this show to only really have a cult fan base at most. Now with Disney Plus, we get all the episodes on there with all 5 seasons. And yes, it is 5 despite the fact Disney decided to lump the rest of the episodes onto one season with season 3. Why they do that, I have no idea. But the series is not a hard watch at all, with most episodes being very quick and fast paced. It managed to get my attention with its art style and funny moments, but I stay because of how lovable and relatable all these characters really are. Regardless of who, there's going to be at least one character that someone in this series is going to relate to, because it does feel real. It talks about a lot of great themes that usually aren't discussed in animated kids shows, and with that, it has aged a lot better than how it was back in late 90s, right down to the show's ultimate message and theme that appears constantly throughout the series, and one I can definitely abide by. The simple theme of be yourself. It doesn't matter what social quirks you may have or what actually makes you different from a surface level. The right people will accept you for the person you are and inspired to be. Even if it doesn't necessarily seem as normal, that doesn't matter. The stuff that defines you shouldn't be regulated to what's normal. If anything, the show embraces the idea that being unique and different from others is really what makes you, you. Others will appreciate the fact that you are different from others, and even if you screw up, as long as you can learn from those mistakes and embrace those attributes, people will be fine with the person you are. Regardless of gender, race, or whatever else, be yourself, and don't let others think you're bad for being out there. It's a show that really should be looked at again, as sometimes shows, despite their age, can hold up due to really embracing the idea of identity in a way that only the 90s can. So take that for what it's worth.
Oh, honey, go to your room.